He built a life of control and silence, until 3 boys shattered it with their quiet need for love. What began as a detour became the only road that ever mattered. Before we get started, leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from so we can say hello to you. Now, on to the story. Nathan Cole didn't walk, he cut through space like time owed him. Every morning in downtown Chicago, his footsteps echoed across glass and granite like a metronome of success. At 43, Nathan had built Coltech Industries from a spare-room startup to a multi-billion-dollar empire. People didn't just respect him, they feared how little emotion he showed. He was a man of calendars, contracts, and calculated decisions. And this morning was no different. The sun hadn't fully risen, the spring air still clinging to a winter chill as Nathan exited his high-rise tower, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. His driver stood by the car door, waiting. Nathan's mind had already jumped past his 9 o'clock meeting with international investors, past the 10:15 legal call, past the dozen decisions that would ripple through global markets before noon. His time was a commodity. And right now, he was spending it well. Until something stopped him. Not a noise, he was used to noise in this city. Honking horns, barking vendors, chattering tourists. No, this was a stillness. A disturbance in the rhythm of his world. Nathan slowed, actually slowed, and turned his head. At the corner near a coffee shop entrance stood 3 boys. They looked 10, maybe a bit younger. Same height, same unruly dark hair, same tired eyes. But one was sagging at the knees, clinging to his brothers like a threadbare puppet. His face was contorted in pain, skin pale, sweat lining his brow. The other 2 boys, barely steady themselves, were trying to keep him upright. Nathan froze. Something foreign twisted in his chest. They weren't crying. They weren't screaming. They weren't even speaking. They were just holding on. For a long beat, he stood there, caught between instinct and impulse. His phone buzzed again, his assistant no doubt reminding him that he was 30 seconds behind schedule. But Nathan didn't look down. He stepped off the curb. "Hey," he called out, voice firm, cutting through the morning haze. "Is he hurt?" The taller of the 2 supporting boys looked up, wary but not surprised. "His stomach hurts. Really bad." Nathan crouched slightly to meet their eyes, unusual for him, unnatural even. "Why aren't you at a hospital?" Nathan's breath caught in his throat, though he gave no visible sign. The world behind him, conference calls, billion-dollar mergers, suddenly felt very far away. "Where are your parents?" It wasn't the words that got him. It was the way the boy said them, like he'd said it too many times already. Nathan Cole, the man who never missed a minute, glanced at his watch, and didn't care. For the first time in years, his next step had nothing to do with business, and just like that, the clock stopped. His morning routine was as polished and precise as the platinum watch on his wrist, down to the minute. That Tuesday, as the wind skimmed along the edges of Michigan Avenue, Nathan moved with practiced indifference through the business district, his eyes glued to the stream of notifications on his phone. Investors in Zurich. Legal updates from Seoul. A board vote in precisely 51 minutes. Every decision in his life had been sharpened by calculation. There was no room for detours. Until there was. He had just stepped off the curb toward his waiting car when someone, caught in his periphery. 3 boys. Standing near the corner of a cafe, nearly camouflaged by the flow of pedestrians. At first, it was just a blur, dark hair, hunched shoulders, stillness. Then his gaze locked in. The smallest of the 3 was crumpling forward, held upright only by the other 2. One boy clutched his arm. The other had an arm looped tightly around his back, bearing most of his weight. Their faces were pale. Tight. Too serious for their age. Too quiet for a city morning. Nathan paused. He never paused. Something inside him hesitated, not out of sympathy, not yet. Just curiosity. Maybe instinct. Maybe memory. His thumb stopped mid-scroll on his phone, and he took a step closer. The city noise muffled around him as if someone had turned down the volume. "Hey," he said, his voice rougher than he expected. "Is he hurt?" The tallest of the boys looked up. His eyes held the defiance of someone who'd been told no too many times. But beneath it, something else. Exhaustion. Hunger. Fear barely held at bay. "He's sick," the boy answered softly. "His stomach hurts real bad." The smallest boy's face was damp with sweat. His jaw clenched like he was fighting back a scream. Nathan crouched slightly, instinct overriding logic. "You need to get him to a hospital." "Why are you out here?" The second boy shifted uncomfortably. "We can't go," he said. "We don't have money. And, we don't have anyone." Nathan blinked. "Where are your parents?" The older boy's response was practiced. "Our mom died a few months ago. We don't know our dad. It's just us. 3 children. No mother. No father. Carrying their sick brother through the city like it was just another thing to survive." He should have walked away. He should have said he was sorry and kept moving. But Nathan didn't move. He looked at the time. It was 8:37 a.m. And then, something broke. "Come with me," he said, standing. "You're not doing this alone." The boys didn't move at first. Then, slowly, they nodded, each one holding their brother as they followed a stranger in a suit toward a cab. Nathan didn't look back. That moment, on a random sidewalk, on a random Tuesday, was the one where everything he thought he cared about stopped making sense. The walls of the private clinic gleamed with sterile precision, but inside Nathan Cole, nothing felt clean or controlled. As Ethan was rushed through sliding glass doors on a stretcher, Nathan followed close behind, his expensive leather shoes echoing across polished tile. The boy was barely conscious, his head rolling against his twin brother Liam's shoulder during the taxi ride. The third boy, Oliver, sat stiffly beside Nathan, his small hands balled into fists in his lap. He didn't say much, but his eyes never left his brother. Inside the emergency wing, a nurse tried to stop Nathan for intake questions, but one look at his face and name badge told her to stand aside, and that was all it took. The staff sprang into motion. As Ethan disappeared through double doors, Nathan was left standing in the corridor with Liam and Oliver, both still and silent like statues placed out of context. A nurse approached again, this time gentler, clipboard in hand. "We need information. Name? Age? Medical history?" "We're 10, Liam answered first, voice soft but steady. "All of us. We're triplets." Their names came next, Ethan, Liam, Oliver, and then their mothers, Grace Monroe. Nathan's jaw clenched at the sound. Familiar. Sharp. It scraped something loose in his chest. The boys didn't know their birthdays, just the month. They had no insurance. No guardian. No father listed on any paperwork. "We were in a shelter," Liam explained. "But they didn't have beds anymore. So we left." "How long have you been on the street?" the nurse asked. 2 days, Oliver whispered. His voice cracked on the last word. Nathan turned his head away, throat tightening. His instinct screamed to retreat, to delegate, to find some formal channel to hand this off. This wasn't his world. He didn't do broken things, didn't have the tools to fix them. But here they were. 3 boys. Alone. And one of them might be dying. He sat down with the 2 conscious brothers in the waiting area, surrounded by soft pastel walls and calming artwork that seemed painfully out of place. The boys didn't fidget. They didn't cry. They looked like they were bracing for another door to slam in their faces. 2 agonizing hours passed before a doctor returned. Nathan stood before she even spoke. "Appendicitis," she said. "Acute. But we caught it in time. He needs surgery. We need a legal guardian to sign off." Without hesitation, Nathan reached into his coat. The clipboard was in his hand a moment later. As he signed his name, bold and decisive, a strange electricity filled the air. This wasn't a business deal. It was a commitment. And once ink hit the page, there was no undoing it. He returned to the waiting room and sat down between Liam and Oliver. "Your brother's going to be okay," he said, quieter than he expected. Liam exhaled shakily. Oliver nodded once. They didn't thank him. They didn't need to. They simply leaned in, just enough for Nathan to feel it. And for the first time in a decade, he stayed. The hallway outside the hospital surgery wing was too quiet. Nathan Cole, the man who once commanded silence with the weight of his title, now found himself swallowed by it. He had paced back and forth for nearly an hour before a nurse suggested he get some rest, while Ethan was in surgery. Rest. The word sounded laughable. Instead, he looked at Liam and Oliver, the twins who had barely spoken above a whisper since their brother was wheeled away. The 3 of them stood there, a mismatched triangle, 2 skinny boys in oversized clothes and 1 sharply dressed billionaire holding a phone he hadn't checked in hours. His entire world felt like it had slipped into another orbit. "I'm not letting you go back out there," Nathan finally said, his voice low, resolute. The boys looked up at him, startled. Oliver clutched the sleeve of his hoodie, and Liam tilted his head, guarded. "Not tonight," Nathan added, then hesitated. "Not ever, if I can help it." The word surprised even him. But the moment they were spoken, they felt immovable. "Why are you helping us?" Liam asked, voice soft but steady. Nathan stared at him for a beat. Then answered, honestly, "Because someone should have." And no one did. They said nothing, but something in their posture shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the first breath of something less defensive. He called for a car. The hotel he chose was close by, upscale, anonymous. He didn't take them to his glass-walled house in the suburbs. That would have been too much, too soon. Instead, he booked a suite under a different name, just in case. When they arrived, the boys stepped inside the room slowly, like they were afraid it might disappear. Their eyes scanned everything, the tall lamps, the velvet chairs, the view of the city skyline from the window. But they didn't ask questions. Didn't ask for food. Or toys. Or even a bed. They just stood there. Silent. Waiting for direction. Nathan's throat tightened. He picked up the hotel phone and ordered mac and cheese, apple slices, and orange juice. As they waited, he took off his jacket and loosened his tie, something he hadn't done before 10 p.m. in years. It felt strangely right. When the food came, Oliver whispered, "Thank you," before he and Liam devoured it like it was their first real meal in days. Nathan sat nearby, watching, not them, exactly, but the weight they carried. It wasn't hunger that broke him. It was how they saved half their juice, as if they didn't know when they'd get more. Later, he found them curled together on the bed, whispering. When he asked if they needed anything else, Liam looked up and said, "Can you stay in the room with us?" Nathan nodded without hesitation and sat in the armchair by the window. The lights were low. The city blinked outside. And for the first time in years, Nathan Cole didn't feel like running toward anything. He just stayed. And it was enough. Nathan Cole sat in the corner of the hotel suite, the soft glow of the laptop screen casting faint shadows across his sharp features. The boys were asleep, at least, he thought they were. From across the room, he could still hear the occasional rustle of blankets, the gentle rhythm of 3 children who didn't yet know they were no longer alone in the world. He hesitated before opening the file. The email had come earlier that morning. Subject: DNA test results, confidential. He hadn't told anyone, not the boys, not his assistant, not even the lawyer he had on retainer. He'd submitted the samples quietly, part of him clinging to the idea that this couldn't be true. That this was just a detour, a strange twist in an otherwise tightly mapped life. But as the report loaded, line by line, all denial drained from his body. Probability of paternity, 99.9987%. Conclusion: Nathan Cole is the biological father of Ethan, Liam, and Oliver Monroe. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a breath he didn't remember holding. His hands, usually steady, hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly. There it was. Undeniable. Irrefutable. These weren't just three boys he had helped out of moral obligation. They were his sons. His flesh. His blood. He looked toward the bed. Oliver had shifted in his sleep, now curled toward his twin, Ethan, whose face was still pale from surgery but finally at peace. Liam slept furthest from them, his brow furrowed even in rest, like the weight of responsibility hadn't fully let go. Nathan swallowed hard. Guilt pressed heavy in his chest, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, relentless kind that crept in the spaces between thought and action. Grace Monroe, she hadn't listed a father on any documents. She hadn't come asking for help. She hadn't left a trail. But now he wondered, had she tried? Had she stood outside his office once, years ago, too scared to walk in? Had she whispered his name while tucking the boys into bed, unsure whether to curse him or forgive him? His jaw tightened. He didn't have those answers. He might never have them. But he had this. This truth. This moment. He stood and walked quietly across the room, pulling the blanket up over Ethan's small shoulders. The boy stirred slightly but didn't wake. Nathan brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and whispered more to himself than anyone, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Then he sat back down, stared at the report again, and closed the laptop. His life, once ruled by contracts, deals, and quarterly projections, had just been rewritten by three little boys who didn't even know what they'd changed. And for the first time in his life, Nathan didn't care about what came next, only that he was here now. And that he wasn't going anywhere. The hotel suite was quiet that morning, a calm that felt almost borrowed. The rain had softened into a mist outside the windows, streaking the glass in silver veins. Inside, the boys sat on the floor of the living room, drawing with cheap hotel pens on the back of the notepad Nathan had found on the nightstand. Crayons would have to come later. Right now, this was what they had, and they didn't seem to mind. Nathan Cole sat at the edge of the couch, laptop open on the coffee table, the glow from the screen casting a pale light across his face. His heart pounded beneath his tailored shirt. He had read the DNA results 3 times, and still, the words didn't feel real. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. All 3 boys, Ethan, Liam, and Oliver, were his. The names echoed like a slow-moving tide in his chest. Grace Monroe hadn't lied. She'd just never told him. He swallowed hard and looked over at them. Ethan was still recovering from his surgery, curled under a blanket near the armrest. Liam sat cross-legged, drawing careful lines on the page. And Oliver, small, quiet Oliver, was watching him with those 2 wise eyes again. Nathan didn't know what the right words were. But the longer he waited, the heavier the truth pressed on his shoulders. He closed the laptop. "Do you remember your mom ever talking about someone named Nathan?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Liam looked up immediately. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in recognition. "She did once," he said after a pause. "She said that was your name. But she told us not to try and find you." He glanced down at the paper in his lap. "Said you were gone a long time ago." Nathan's breath caught. He nodded slowly, like the motion might carry some unspoken apology. She and I, we knew each other. A long time ago, he said. I didn't know about you. Not until now. Oliver tilted his head, his brows drawn in thought. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Are you our dad?" Nathan blinked. The question landed with more force than he expected. 3 little words that carried the weight of a decade. Of absence. Of possibility. He didn't rush the answer. He owed them more than that. Yes, he said finally, and the word came out quieter than he intended. I am. The silence that followed was thick but not heavy. Liam didn't flinch. He didn't smile either, but his pencil stilled on the page. Oliver didn't speak again. He just sat back, letting the words hang in the air like something sacred. Ethan stirred slightly on the couch but didn't wake. It was Liam who broke the silence, not with a question, but with something simpler, acceptance. Okay, he said, and resumed drawing. Not because it didn't matter, but because it already had. Nathan's throat tightened. There were no fireworks, no outbursts, just a subtle shift in gravity. Something between them had changed. Later that afternoon, they visited Ethan in the hospital. He was groggy but smiled the second he saw his brothers. Liam told him the news in a matter-of-fact tone. Nathan's our dad. Ethan looked past him, straight at Nathan. I thought so, he said, and reached out his small, bandaged hand. Nathan didn't hesitate. He took it, warmth and belief folding into his palm like something long overdue. In that moment, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't a man of quarterly reports and precise forecasts. He was just Dad. And that, somehow, felt more powerful than anything he had ever been. The hotel room smelled faintly of mac and cheese and orange juice, the kind of makeshift dinner Nathan Cole never imagined serving. He stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the boys finish the last bites of food like it was the only warm meal they'd had in weeks. It probably was. Ethan, the smallest and weakest, lay curled on the hospital bed across town, recovering from emergency surgery. Liam and Oliver, his twin brothers, were now tucked into the 2 queen beds in the suite Nathan had booked under a false name. He wasn't sure why he'd done that. Maybe to protect them. Maybe to protect himself. Outside, the Chicago skyline blinked in neon and steel. Inside, the air felt thick with questions none of them had the language, or the trust, to ask. Oliver had spoken the least since arriving. But when Nathan offered them both hotel robes and slippers, the boy had grinned, tugging at the oversized sleeves like they were treasure. Liam, ever watchful, said little but tracked every move Nathan made, like trying to determine whether this stranger could be trusted for more than one night. When the food was gone, and the room had gone quiet, Liam asked the first real question. Why are you helping us? The words were soft, but carried the weight of a world that had told these boys not to expect help from anyone. Nathan didn't answer right away. He stared at the floor, the knot in his chest pulling tighter. He could have said it was because he felt sorry for them. He could have lied and claimed it was a one-time thing. But the truth was louder than anything else in his chest. Because someone should have helped you already, he said quietly. And no one did. The boys didn't respond, not out loud. But both shifted ever so slightly toward him. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to say they had heard him, and maybe believed him. That night, Nathan didn't go home. Instead, he sat in the armchair by the window, his jacket draped over the back, his phone silent for the first time in years. He watched Liam and Oliver fall asleep, one turning over every few minutes, the other perfectly still, except for the small movement of a hand occasionally reaching out to make sure the other was still there. He should have been back at his penthouse. His inbox would be full. His board of directors would wonder why their CEO had disappeared midweek without explanation. But none of that mattered now. When the hospital called with an update on Ethan, surgery successful, recovery stable, Nathan closed his eyes in silent relief. He gave instructions to keep the boy under observation and confirmed he would handle the hospital paperwork in the morning. Then he opened his laptop. Not for work. Not for numbers or graphs or financial projections. But for legal forms. He searched terms he'd never imagined typing: emergency guardianship, temporary custody laws in Illinois, adoption pathways without maternal consent. He didn't know what any of it meant, not yet. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wasn't letting them go back to the street. Not tonight. Not ever. He was still afraid. Of the responsibility. Of the past. Of the truth burning in the back of his mind about what the DNA test might confirm. But he'd already stayed. He'd already chosen them. The click of his keyboard echoed through the quiet room as Liam shifted in his sleep and Oliver mumbled something unintelligible. And in that soft, imperfect silence, Nathan Cole, once the most untouchable man in a city of ambition, started becoming someone else entirely. Someone who stayed. Someone who mattered. Someone who, for the first time, might become a father. Nathan Cole had never been a man who believed in miracles, at least, not the kind that weren't planned or executed with meticulous precision. But as he stepped across the threshold of his sleek suburban home, a sudden weight pressed on his chest. This house, so cold and impersonal just days ago, was now anything but. It was cluttered with the chaos of children, shoes scattered by the door, toy cars underfoot, and the soft hum of the television in the background, where the boys sat engrossed in a cartoon. It was the kind of noise, the kind of mess, he'd never known. And yet, it was everything he needed. Ethan, Liam, and Oliver had been with him for only a few days, but already, the silence of the home that had once mirrored his own solitary life was beginning to dissolve. The house, with its sleek marble countertops and polished wood floors, had once felt like the epitome of success, a monument to his years of hard work, a place where nothing was ever out of place, where everything fit in its perfect, sterile order. But now, as he walked through the hallway, it felt like a shell. Empty. Hollow. He stopped in the kitchen, his fingers brushing against the refrigerator, where a drawing of a stick figure family was now pinned up. It was Oliver's work, Nathan guessed. The boy had been drawing non-stop ever since they'd arrived. His art wasn't complex, but it was filled with a tenderness that Nathan wasn't used to. Liam had asked him earlier that morning if they could have breakfast together, sitting at the kitchen table like a real family. And for the first time, Nathan said yes without hesitation. They had burnt toast and spilled orange juice, and for a moment, he felt the weight of the world lift just a little. But the guilt was always there, lingering in the background. What kind of man had he been to let them go so long without him? The thought crept in whenever he least expected it, like a shadow he couldn't outrun. He'd spent so many years building his empire, burying his emotions beneath layers of contracts and mergers, always telling himself that work was the only thing that mattered. But now, as he looked at the boys, sitting at his kitchen table, laughing over burnt pancakes, he felt a rush of realization. His empire, his wealth, had never given him the one thing he truly needed: family. Later that evening, after a chaotic dinner filled with spilled milk and laughter, the house grew quieter, the energy settling into a comfortable hum. The boys, exhausted from their first day in this strange new home, were tucked into bed. Nathan stood at the door of their shared room, his hand resting lightly on the frame as he watched them sleep. Ethan, the oldest, was sprawled across the bed, a soft snore escaping his lips. Liam clutched his worn stuffed bunny tightly, while Oliver lay on his side, one arm draped across the other's in an unspoken show of solidarity. The room was a jumble of blankets and stuffed animals, the walls adorned with crayon drawings. It was nothing like the sterile, controlled space he had once inhabited alone. For the first time in years, Nathan didn't feel the loneliness that had haunted him for so long. The emptiness of the house, which had been so familiar and comforting, no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage. He had spent so much of his life shutting others out, hiding behind the walls of his success. But now, as he stood in the doorway, watching the boys sleep peacefully, he knew that something in him had changed. The house wasn't just a place, it was home. And he was a father. He closed the door softly, his chest tightening with a mixture of guilt and hope. The world he had built was no longer just his. It was theirs too. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but so was the promise of something better. Something real. It sat quietly at the base of the mailbox, slightly worn at the corners, as if it had traveled a long road just to reach this exact doorstep. The boys ran ahead into the kitchen, arguing about cereal brands and who got the last packet of gummy bears, leaving Nathan to pick it up alone. Nathan didn't open it right away. He stood in the entryway, staring at it as if it might change shape. Something about the handwriting stirred a cold, ancient ache in his chest. He'd seen it before. Years ago. And even before unfolding the paper inside, he already knew. Grace Monroe. Lego pieces, and shut the door behind him. The rest of the house buzzed faintly with the sound of a cartoon on low volume and the rustle of cereal boxes. But here, in this sterile space of metal and silence, he opened the letter. It was dated over a year ago. If this ever reaches you, it means something's gone wrong, or maybe, somehow, right. I don't know if you remember me. Maybe you've long forgotten. Maybe I was just a moment to you. But I remember everything. And I need you to know the truth. Nathan's throat tightened. His eyes didn't blink as they moved across the words. I didn't know how. I didn't want them to grow up feeling unwanted, and I was afraid you'd see them as a mistake. You were always so careful, so distant, like the world had to earn your attention. I didn't want them to have to earn their father's love. He exhaled hard, but no sound escaped. The ache in his chest shifted, heavier now. Not just for what had happened, but for what hadn't. Nathan laid the letter down on the desk and covered his mouth with one hand, eyes closed. He had found them, but not because of fate or design. He had nearly walked past them. Nearly left them there. That single pause, that unplanned moment on the street corner, had altered every molecule of his life. And now here it was, confirmation that Grace had once hoped he might pause. That he might stay. She hadn't known if he was capable of love. But she had left the door cracked just wide enough. Nathan sat with the letter for a long time. He read it again. And again. Until he could hear her voice in the words, until her slanted handwriting blurred behind his tears. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely. But it was trust. The kind that could only come from a woman who had carried every burden and still believed deep down that there was good left in him. And somehow, she had been right. But Nathan smiled, quiet and full. He had missed the beginning of their story. But he wouldn't miss another page. The rain hadn't stopped all evening. It tapped steadily against the windows of the suite, soft and constant, as if trying to soothe the weight of a memory that refused to fade. The boys were curled up on the couch in a blanket fort made of hotel pillows and chairs, a flashlight balanced between cushions casting shadows on their faces. A board game lay abandoned in front of them, forgotten somewhere between laughter and silence. Nathan sat nearby, his laptop closed, a cup of tea cooling on the nightstand. The day had been long, full of little joys: burnt popcorn, a spilled juice box, a heated debate over which movie to watch. But now the room had shifted. The energy had gone still. Not sad, not tense, just waiting. It was Logan who broke the quiet. "Do you think Mom knew you'd find us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question landed in the room like thunder, soft but unstoppable. Sam looked up from where he was fiddling with a toy car, his eyes wide. Joshua stilled completely, the flashlight flickering just slightly beside him. Nathan didn't answer right away. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly tight, then slowly stood and walked to the small drawer in the side table. He pulled out the envelope he had tucked away there days ago, the one he'd read alone in his office, over and over, until the ink felt imprinted on his heart. Wordlessly, he crossed the room and sat beside the boys, holding the letter out to Logan. "I think she hoped," he said, his voice thick with meaning. "And I think she was right." Logan took the envelope gently, as if it were something sacred. Sam scooted closer to read along, and even Joshua sat upright, drawn in by the gravity in Nathan's voice. The letter was written in their mother's handwriting, delicate, slanted, full of quiet emotion. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. She had written it when she knew her time was running out. She hadn't said much, just that she had 3 sons, that she had loved them with everything she had, and that if life ever brought them to Nathan, she hoped he'd try to understand. She didn't explain why she never told him. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't offer blame. She just believed in them, in him, in the small thread of fate that might someday tie them back together. When they reached the end, the silence was different now. Full, not hollow. "Can I keep it in my room?" Sam asked, almost shyly. Nathan nodded. "Of course." The boys said nothing else. They didn't ask for another story before bed. Instead, Logan clicked off the flashlight, and the room dimmed to a peaceful glow. They lay close together in the nest of blankets, and Nathan sat nearby, watching them with a heart that felt too full to speak. The rain continued to fall, softer now, like a lullaby. Nathan didn't move. He didn't need to. Something had shifted. Not between them but within him. He had wondered for days if he was doing the right thing. If they would accept him. If he was enough. But tonight, as he watched his sons find comfort not in what he said but in what he showed, he understood. Grace had believed in him, even in silence. And they believed too. Not because he was perfect. But because he had stayed. And for them, that was everything. It started as a quiet suggestion over scrambled eggs. Sam, his fork hovering midair, said softly, "Can we plant something for Mom?" Nathan looked up from his coffee, surprised by the question. Across the table, Logan paused mid-bite, his eyes narrowing slightly in thought, while Ethan, still recovering but brighter now, nodded from the couch, where he was bundled in a blanket. "A tree," Sam added. "Something pretty. Something that stays." Nathan didn't speak right away. His instinct had always been to fix things with money or strategy. But this wasn't something to fix, it was something to feel. And it caught him off guard how deeply the suggestion moved him. Later that Sunday, with the sun still low and the spring air crisp, Nathan took the boys to a small nursery tucked behind a hardware store in the outskirts of town. It smelled of damp soil, blooming jasmine, and the faint sharpness of fertilizer. Dozens of trees stretched in neat rows, some tall and thin, others squat and leafy. Nathan let them roam, let them decide. They circled the lot, disagreeing as brothers do. Logan wanted something sturdy, something that wouldn't die too fast. Ethan pointed to a lemon tree, claiming it smelled like sunshine. But it was Sam who stood still beneath a fragile-looking sapling with soft pink blossoms clinging to its branches. "This one," he whispered, almost reverently. "It looks like something from her picture book." Nathan walked over and studied the tag, "Flowering cherry, Prunus cerulata." Delicate. Fleeting. Beautiful. It felt right. He nodded. Back home, the boys picked a spot in the backyard, near the edge of the garden, where the morning light fell just right. Nathan dug most of the hole himself, not because the boys couldn't help, but because their thin arms tired quickly. Still, they stayed by his side, passing tools, fetching water, asking a million questions he didn't always have answers for. Logan crouched beside him, brushing loose dirt from the roots with careful fingers. "Will it grow fast?" he asked. "Not fast," Nathan answered, wiping sweat from his brow. but strong. When they finally placed the tree in the ground, everyone stood back. The wind moved gently through the yard, rustling the branches like a whisper. No one said anything for a long moment. There was no ceremony, no scripted words. Just stillness, and something sacred in the quiet. Ethan broke the silence by handing Nathan the tiny watering can he'd insisted on buying. "You go first," he said. "You're the tallest." Nathan chuckled under his breath, but his chest ached as he poured water slowly over the base of the tree. One by one, the boys followed. Sam pressed his palms to the damp soil. "Now she's part of this house too," he said, more to himself than anyone. That night, after dinner and after they'd all curled up for a movie none of them paid much attention to, Nathan passed the boys' room on his way to turn off the hallway light. Inside, he heard Logan's voice, not whispered, but clear. "I think Mom would have liked it here." Nathan stopped. The words settled into him like roots finding their place underground, quiet, unseen, but permanent. He didn't move. He didn't reply. He simply smiled. Not the smile he used in boardrooms or in photographs, but the rare kind that came from knowing, truly knowing, that something in this fractured world had begun to heal. He stood in the hallway a little longer, listening to the soft sounds of sleep and laughter drifting behind him. Then he turned off the light and walked away from the man he used to be. And toward something far more real. Nathan Cole hadn't circled the date. He hadn't set a reminder or marked it in his calendar. But when he passed the front door that morning, the very same threshold where he had once hesitated before helping 3 boys he didn't know, his steps faltered. It had been 1 year. Exactly 1 year since his carefully curated life had been cracked open by 3 small voices, one whispered confession, and a street corner he would never forget. He didn't mention it to the boys. They didn't mention it to him. But throughout the day, there were signs they remembered. Liam lingered at breakfast longer than usual, his spoon tracing slow circles in a half-finished bowl of cereal. Oliver kept asking to see old photos, the ones Nathan had printed months ago and tucked into an album they rarely opened. Ethan, normally the most talkative of the 3, was uncharacteristically quiet, staring out the window as if trying to make sense of a memory too large for words. Nathan wasn't sure what to do. He wasn't a man who celebrated sentiment. He didn't know how to plan a party for something that had started as a crisis and become the most important thing in his life. So instead of planning, he did what he knew how to do, he prepared. When the boys got home from school that afternoon, they found the dining table set with small surprises. A stack of new board games. A chocolate cake from their favorite bakery. And 3 gift boxes, simple and undecorated, each labeled with their names in Nathan's own handwriting. They froze at the sight. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Liam stepped forward and asked, "What is this?" Nathan cleared his throat. "It's not really a party," he said. "But I thought, maybe we should mark the day." Ethan's eyes lit up as he rushed to the table. "You remembered," he whispered. Oliver ran his fingers along the edge of his box but didn't open it right away. "Is this the day we met you?" Nathan nodded, voice low. "Yeah. It's the day everything changed." That evening, they ate dinner on the back patio, beneath strings of lights Nathan had clumsily hung the week before. The bulbs glowed warm against the soft spring night. The meal was simple, grilled burgers, fries, and lemonade, but the table pulsed with laughter and teasing. Ethan dropped a tomato slice in his lap. Liam proudly announced he thought he'd grown 2 inches taller since last year. Oliver insisted they play one of the new board games outside in the dark. Nathan, for once, said yes to everything. After the cake had been cut and the last fork scraped across frosting-smeared plates, the 4 of them carried blankets out to the lawn and lay in a line beneath the stars. The sky was clear, the kind of night that wrapped around you like a secret. Nathan lay between Oliver and Ethan, with Liam just beside them. No one said much at first. The boys gazed upward in silence, letting the moment stretch. Then Oliver reached over and took Nathan's hand, wordlessly, instinctively. Nathan held it tight, surprised by how natural it felt now, how right. They talked about space, about living on Mars, about whether stars could be touched. Ethan asked what stars were made of, and Nathan, ever the logical man, explained atoms, gas, and light. But Oliver interrupted gently. I think stars are just memories that glow. No one argued. No one laughed. They simply stared at the sky, letting that truth settle in their bones. Later, after the boys had gone to bed, Nathan walked through the house, turning off lights, collecting stray socks, straightening a tilted frame on the wall. And when he stepped out onto the porch, tea in hand, and looked at the tree they had planted for Grace, he smiled. Not the smile of a CEO. Not the grin of a man closing a deal. But the quiet smile of a father who had finally come home. Nathan Cole never thought love would come wrapped in mismatched socks, burnt toast, and cartoon marathons. Yet here he was, standing barefoot in his own kitchen, watching 3 10-year-old boys argue over who got the last chocolate chip pancake. Ethan, fresh from his surgery and still favoring his side, leaned on the counter and grinned triumphantly as he snatched the last piece. You snooze, you lose, he teased. Liam groaned dramatically. You're supposed to be recovering, not cheating. Recovering doesn't mean I'm dead, Ethan said, his eyes twinkling. Nathan stood back and took in the scene, his sons, his kitchen, his life, none of it the way he had planned. But it was more alive than anything he had built before. The sleek, stainless steel kitchen had been cold and untouched for years. Now it smelled like syrup and sounded like laughter. He'd made the pancakes himself, slightly burnt, slightly lumpy, but the boys had devoured them like a gourmet feast. He didn't mind the mess, the chaos, or the noise anymore. Later that afternoon, while Liam and Ethan sprawled across the living room floor with building blocks, Sam followed Nathan into his office. The boy had become his shadow in recent weeks, always curious, always watching. Why do you wear the same watch every day? Sam asked, climbing onto the armchair like it was a throne. Nathan glanced at the sleek, silver timepiece. Because it reminds me of order. Was your life boring before us? Sam asked bluntly. Nathan blinked, surprised. He chuckled softly. It wasn't boring. Just, quiet. Sam nodded solemnly. Too quiet. Nathan stared at him for a long moment, then leaned over and gently tousled the boy's hair. Yeah. Too quiet. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, exhausted from an impromptu backyard soccer game and full of pizza Nathan had bravely attempted himself, he sat at his desk and opened his laptop. It was time. The legal process hadn't been easy. He had worked closely with a family law specialist, who warned him that adoption wasn't just paperwork, it was scrutiny. Interviews. Home evaluations. Proving fitness to raise children. And in his case, given the absence of any previous parental involvement, it would raise eyebrows. But Nathan wasn't trying to impress anyone. He clicked submit on the formal adoption petition, every word reviewed and double-checked. He had filled out the paperwork himself. Not his assistant. Not his lawyer. Him. 3 names. Ethan Monroe Cole. Liam Monroe Cole. Samuel Monroe Cole. All his. He leaned back in his chair, heart thudding, not from nerves, but from something deeper. This wasn't a business acquisition. This was the only thing in his life that had ever felt truly, irreversibly personal. Just then, Liam appeared in the doorway, barefoot, hair tousled, hugging a pillow. Can't sleep, he mumbled. Nathan pushed the laptop aside. Want to sit with me for a bit? Liam walked in and curled up in the armchair across from him. After a moment of silence, he looked up. Why are you doing all this for us? He asked, voice low, but steady. Nathan didn't answer right away. He looked at his son, not a project, not an obligation, but someone he had nearly missed out on. "Because I should have been there from the start," he said softly. "And I won't miss another day." Liam stared at him for a long time, then nodded. "Just once." Quiet. Final. Nathan didn't sleep much that night. But he didn't need to. In the silence, there was no emptiness, only presence. Tomorrow, they'd wake up and make more pancakes. Burnt or not, it didn't matter. They were his sons. And he was finally becoming their father. The late afternoon sun slanted through the bedroom window, casting golden lines across the hardwood floor. The house was quieter than usual. Sam had fallen asleep on the living room couch with a comic book on his chest, and Joshua was watching a documentary about sea creatures with the volume turned low. Liam was in his bedroom, organizing the closet, insisting he didn't need help, but Nathan wandered in anyway, not ready to be alone with his thoughts. "Need a hand?" Nathan asked, leaning against the doorframe. Liam looked up from a stack of mismatched socks, his expression neutral. "I'm just sorting stuff. There's too much." Nathan stepped in and crouched beside him. "That's a good problem to have." Liam didn't respond, but he didn't push him away either. He handed Nathan a box labeled "Miscellaneous," in black marker, the handwriting oddly neat for a child. Nathan lifted the lid without thinking, expecting loose toys, maybe some broken pencils, but what he found made him freeze. Inside were old photographs. Folded papers. A worn hospital bracelet, the ink faded but still legible. Liam Monroe, infant boy 3, Grace Monroe. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. Liam noticed the shift instantly. "You okay?" Nathan sat slowly on the edge of the bed, holding the bracelet in his hand like it might shatter. His fingers trembled as he picked up one of the photographs. It was Grace, young, tired, but smiling. She held 3 swaddled babies in her arms, their tiny faces barely visible. "She kept all of this?" Nathan asked, his voice quiet. Liam nodded. "Yeah. Mom had a box for each of us. This was the only one she took with us when we moved shelters. She said if something ever happened, maybe it'd help us find you." Nathan closed his eyes for a second, swallowing the lump rising in his throat. "She never told me. Never even hinted. She told us once that your name was Nathan," Liam said, almost casually, but his voice had a careful edge to it. "Said you weren't bad. Just gone. That you didn't know." Nathan pressed a palm to his chest, like trying to keep something inside from breaking loose. "Gone. Not bad. Just, gone." He remembered Grace now, not just the way she laughed or the fire in her voice when they argued, but the quiet strength she had when things got hard. He had been too focused on his career, too afraid of the chaos that real life brought with it. And while he had built an empire, she had raised 3 sons alone. "She saved everything," he whispered, lifting a folded note from the box. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Slanted. Careful. The kind of writing a person used when they wanted their words to last. "I'm glad she did," Nathan said after a long silence. Liam finally sat down beside him, his legs dangling off the bed. "Me too." Nathan looked at him, not just as a boy he'd rescued, but as his son. His blood. His legacy. And Grace's. In that moment, the distance between who he had been and who he was becoming seemed to collapse. The photos, the bracelet, the fragile memories packed into a cardboard box, none of it was loud or demanding. But it spoke volumes. Grace hadn't left a roadmap. She hadn't scripted a reunion. But she had believed, even in her last days, that if fate brought them together, he might step up. Might change. Might love. And Nathan had. Too late for her, maybe. But not for the boys. He turned to Liam and said with a quiet finality, "She didn't know if we'd ever find each other, but I think she hoped we would." Liam didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just leaned slightly into Nathan's side, and for a long time, they sat together in the quiet warmth of the room, holding the past, and building a future out of it. Nathan stood on the back porch of his once pristine home, a mug of warm tea cradled in his hands, watching the branches of the cherry blossom tree sway gently in the evening breeze. The sky had begun its descent into dusk, casting soft orange light over the hills. The tree, small but stubborn, had grown since the day they planted it. Its delicate pink flowers fluttered like confessions in the wind, quiet but impossible to ignore. Behind him, the house that once echoed only with silence was alive with sound. Laughter spilled from the living room like music. Someone dropped a spoon. A chair scraped. The television blared a cartoon theme song. It was chaos. Beautiful, unfiltered chaos. And Nathan welcomed every second of it. Just a year ago, he had been a different man, disconnected, disciplined, utterly alone. His mornings had begun with financial forecasts, his evenings ended in silence. He had built an empire of control, where emotions were liabilities and people were data points. That version of himself had no room for love, no tolerance for messiness, and no understanding of family. He had walked through life as if nothing could touch him. But everything changed the moment he saw 3 boys on the sidewalk, holding up their sick brother like a secret they were too tired to carry alone. Now, instead of suits and shareholders, his world revolved around backpacks by the door, lunchboxes on the counter, and mismatched socks on the staircase. He no longer cared about pristine glass walls or imported furniture. The house had been rearranged by their presence, not in architecture, but in spirit. He glanced down at his tea but didn't drink. He was thinking about something Logan had said the night before. After planting the tree, the boys had piled onto the couch, blankets everywhere, popcorn on the carpet. Sam had fallen asleep with his cheek pressed to Nathan's side, and Joshua had nodded off mid-sentence about Jupiter's moons. But Logan had stayed awake. And quietly, without looking up from the stars out the window, he had whispered, "I think Mom would have liked it here." Those words had hit harder than any boardroom loss or hostile takeover ever could. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the breeze brush against his face. That sentence had been everything. Not a test. Not a plea. Just a truth, spoken by a boy who still carried the weight of love and grief in equal measure. He wasn't the man Grace had written about in her final letter, not entirely. She had described him as, not cruel, just gone. And maybe that had been true. Maybe he had run from things he didn't understand. From a future that felt too fragile to risk building. But he wasn't running anymore. Inside, someone called his name. It was Oliver, no, Ethan. Their voices still tripped him up sometimes. He set the mug down and turned toward the door. The porch light flickered on automatically, casting a soft glow behind him. As he stepped inside, the boys looked up from their fort of pillows and shouted in unison, "Come sit with us." He smiled. Not the practiced, polished grin of a man who closed deals for a living, but something deeper. Something real. As he walked into the chaos, barefoot on a rug now permanently crooked, Nathan Cole finally understood. This life wasn't one he had built for himself, but one he had been chosen for. And it had saved him. He was present. He was trying. He was their father. And for the first time in his life, he was home. Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Also, let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all of our stories. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming stories by clicking here on the end screen.